Hey everybody, running into some technical issues. I'm supposed to have an intro rolling right now, but of course it really doesn't want to roll my intro, but that's all right. So I'll do our own little intro. I am thrilled to have Jason Staats with us. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Jason, he runs a daily podcast for accountants, as well as a community for accountants. And it's amazing quality in both the content as well as the actual quality of the videos that you produce. They're funny, they're informative, and they're absolutely amazing. And they're all over. I guess, what are your main platforms where you communicate with people, Jason? Is it Twitter is a big one for you, and LinkedIn? I'm assuming.
Started on Twitter and then YouTube. In the past year or so, LinkedIn's probably biggest, but I'm on just about all of them now.
Do you have a favorite?
I think Twitter's probably still my favorite, even though it's
Twitter's
definitely
still your favorite?
changed. It was the original, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has changed with Elon's at the helm, which is interesting because he's this conversation is really about AI, and he's obviously released Grok, and now Grok 3.0 is out, and lots of claims going on there, and lots of things that he's doing with AI in the media, which maybe we'll chat about later. But I think one of the reasons I'm so thrilled to have you on the show is because you've got such a unique perspective on AI because of what you do. You work with so many different accountants and bookkeepers across the community. So you've got insights into how people are actually implementing AI into their practices. And, you know, I have some unique perspectives on that, and I can't wait to hear yours, as well as the fact that you are really a technology focused professional, right? And do you have any technology training or background, or it's just a passion?
I have some software development background. It's always just been it's always been a passion. Before AI, it was no code, and we were geeking on RPA before this. So it's always been a very big passion of mine. At one point I was leaving accounting and got drawn back because I saw the technology opportunities and realized, oh, accounting's kind of just a technology problem. So
Right?
I love how those things come together.
It really is just a technology problem. And I was just mentioning to you before we went live how we've hired a new team, and what we've done is hired an engineer and a bookkeeper and paired them together because of the fact that it is becoming more of a technology problem than it is certainly an accounting problem. And it's the combination of those two skill sets that are really critical of working together, right? But I guess what we've seen is this evolution of technology, even in the recent couple of years, has transformed. There's lots of buzz around AI. We're laughing about tech companies putting it in their call symbols to boost their investors' investment in their stocks, to websites who are just claiming their AI. Which I guess the problem with that is it creates a lot of confusion, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like nobody rolls out of bed one day and thinks, "Oh, I hope somebody, I don't know. I hope I get AI in my app today." It's like, "No, my job before is the same as my job is now. If you can show me a way that it'll save me a pile of time getting from A to B, I'm happy." But nobody's clamoring for another chat assistant, another place to go and like have a conversation about something. Like, nobody wants more. They're like, man, if you can help me get my existing job done more efficiently, sure.
Right. And that's an interesting thing too, right? Because these chat assistants, I mean, what I find with my client base is that people don't want to interact with quote unquote AI or chatbots. They want it to feel really bespoke and personalized. And yet, one chatbots are probably one of the first things to sort of take off in the AI realm. What are your thoughts on effective ways that firms can use AI to to build better and effective communication, both internally and I guess externally as well?
Yeah, if you look at like the struggles of being in education right now and students, quote cheating with using ChatGPT to write essays and stuff like that. Like, that is the environment I wanna foster in my firm. Like, I want the ch
You
I
want
want
people to cheat.
people, yeah, who are finding innovative ways to get stuff done. I think the blocker for
Yeah,
most right now is they just haven't established the boundaries to do so responsibly and, like,
yeah.
created a responsible use policy and all that. AI is interesting, and I'm talking, like, more bottom-up AI, like going out to a ChatGPT and having it help you with a specific pain. It's
Mhm,
different than most of the tech we adopt because it is really a bottom up sort of thing. Nobody's gonna sit you down and say, here's the 10 ways that you can use it. Here's what all the buttons do and all that. Like, it really doesn't work that way. So it's more
mhm,
about getting it into people's hands, sharing your wins, but also ensuring that your incentive structure for your team isn't gonna punish these detours. Like, if I'm paid to sit in a chair, it's like the age old problem of, well, what's in it for me to get to become any more efficient? And so you'll have leadership on one side of their mouth saying, yeah, we want you to lean into AI and all these things. And out the other side of their mouth, they're like, yeah, but all of your incentives are tied to billable hours. So oftentimes it's that incentive structure that's kind of broken, but
mhm.
it is very different to the traditional top-down tech adoption where the big boss comes and says, "We're gonna use this now, and we're gonna do implementation," all these things. It's kind of the opposite.
Mhm. Have you seen any good incentive structures that do encourage this?
I'm a big advocate of production-based,
Right.
pay. There's it changes the game from one game to a different game, for sure.
Yeah.
And so then how
Piecework
that pay
has its own
structure
problems. Yeah.
yeah, how that pay structure works becomes the new game.
Yeah.
But that is more similar to the game I play as the business owner,
Yes.
than the other one.
Mhm.
So, I think it's just about kind of getting their incentives aligned with what I want them to be doing.
Yeah. Which is an ongoing struggle because no matter what pay structure you have in place, people will find ways to game those pay
Yeah,
structures, won't they?
yeah,
Um, and I think you're right. Like, and Chad said this in our conversation with him a couple weeks ago, was the importance of having a policy around how you address AI in your firm.
yeah.
And I think that some people can find that overwhelming. Are there any good examples out there of existing policies that people have shared? Do you have any thoughts on how people could create a good internal use policy?
Um, yeah, 2 weeks from now, I actually partnered with a group, I'll say a network security group to put out a template that folks can swipe. It's the most simple framework I can get to that is fundamentally, if you think about a table, we have different types of data. You have public data on one end of the spectrum, and you have like client identifying sensitive data on the other end of the spectrum, and then say redacted information in the middle. The most simple framework I can get to is for each of those types of data, my firm has to outline what are the approved apps I can use that data in. So in the most
Right.
sensitive use cases, these have to be super locked down apps where there's no data training and two-factor authentication to get access and all that. But my marketing team, I want them to use the best tool for the job, and the most secure tool may not be the best tool for that job. So I don't want to, you know, give them an inferior tool when it doesn't really matter due to the nature of their work. So that's the way I think about it is for given data types, identify approved tools for those data types. Um, and then see what people can figure out. Like having a feedback loop where folks can share like a space in Slack or in Teams or something like that where they can share what they're doing, get ideas from each other. That stuff's gold. Because
Mhm.
I think if you just tell them here are the 10 use cases, it totally misses the point.
Yeah. And you have a community where accountants are able to do that basically with other accountants. And do you want to share a little bit about your community? Because I think your community is an amazing space in itself, which is filled with all your amazing content. But one of the powerful things about any community are its members. So
Yeah.
maybe you can share us a little bit about how your community works and tell us if any of that's going on there.
Yeah, 100%. So my community is called Realize rlz.io. We've got a 500 member cap forever, and we're at that, unfortunately. So this if you're interested. I'm sorry. There's a wait list though. Um, basically, what it is really a peer networking community. It's not an access to Jason community or anything like that. It is folks who have only stumbled into it very deep in my content. So you end up with a collection of people that can go like 17 minutes into this very nuanced sort of thing. They all come in with a somewhat similar perspective on how to run small accounting firms. And then the job of the community, like the infrastructure, I guess, that I've created, the job of that is to just make connections, like get people connected with each other. I don't know about you, the very best thing I ever did was sit down in a room full of people that ran firms just like me for the first time, and I'm like, oh geez, all of
Yeah,
these people get it. And
yeah,
in like a powerful way that even my spouse doesn't get when I come home at the end of the day and she's like, "You're doing a great job." And I'm like, "What? Thanks." Yeah, maybe you don't actually know, but then you go and you like sit in a room with a bunch of people who they just get it 100%, and you can steal ideas from them, and like that's all just very energizing. And so creating that for other people, like that was the big goal.
yeah. I mean, that's why I fell in love with QuickBooks was not so much the product, was the community and the way
Yeah,
that they created that environment for me where I could share with other people. And it was so unique to me at the time. Like, I guess this goes back about 10 years now, because prior to that, accountants and bookkeepers, we didn't share like this. We held
yeah.
everything close to the vest, and we viewed everybody as a competitor. And we didn't have that mindful or that abundance mindset where we were willing to share and learning. And yet, it's propelled these firms to be able to grow in unbelievable ways. Um, and so, I think you probably have a group of 500 people that are able to grow and explore new technologies in ways that I don't think any other group of accountants can do because of the fact that they've got each other there in that support system. But I wonder when you first started talking about ChatGPT, a year and a half ago, and it was coming out, people had to start approaching AI for the first time. And what did you see? Like, what were ways that people were in your community able to actually successfully approach AI and start implementing it in your business? Were there any tips or tricks for those in your community that were able to do it well?
Yeah, in the early days, it was very much about writing. It wasn't until later on that ChatGPT was more multimodal. You could give it an Excel file, it could give you a
Yeah,
PDF back, stuff like that. So early days, it was very text based, and so it was a lot of writing. It was outlining a blog post, outlining a podcast episode, taking this body of text and making it into something else. It was largely text based stuff, which was
yeah,
super useful because man, accounts like we did not get into this thing to send sensitive emails like that.
yeah,
That is one of those things that you can burn a whole afternoon on, and that's where
yeah.
it
And most
started.
of us are better with numbers than we are with words, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%. That's where it started, but it's come a long ways from there to now. Um, just the fact that you can give it files. You can ask it for a
Mhm.
work paper back to show its work in PDF format that's like annotated, just like a person would annotate it. Like there's just so much more possible now. In the beginning, it was like go out and you can probably tackle these kind of problems with it. These days, it's like the biggest problem is access to information. What context does it need to do the job that you're asking it to do? And
Mhm.
still, the headache of having to round up that context, come over here to do the thing, try to get it to do the thing, and then put the output back over here. Like that's still the kind of the highest friction aspect of it.
Right, right. Um, and so, I mean, obviously, it's changed a lot from those early days. If someone was just hopping into the world of AI right now, where would you recommend they start?
Um, just start experimenting. I mean, I try not to. I mean, writing is the easy one. Next time we need to write something like that. I try to just really though, like get people to have a conversation with it because
Hmm.
the blocker for most people is just remembering that it exists
Yeah,
and like even using it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from converting a report from one format, the way it comes out of one system, to the import format, it has to go into another system. And like, there's
Yeah.
just so many fiddly little things like that where it can save you some time. But we're not used to like this work companion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. I've got kids. My oldest is in second grade, so they're not that old, but like kids that are growing up right now with like Roblox. Like Roblox has a built-in AI assistant where you can ask it to do anything that you want it to do. And there's this
Yeah.
level of, I mean, it's like when iPads are becoming a thing and you see kids who have used iPads their whole life and they just have this instinctual ability to do anything. There's going to be a generation of people that have this expectation of this kind of co-working assistant that could do anything for them. But for the olds like you and I, like it still requires rewiring the brain to go out to this other place to get help. Um, so whatever for you, whatever makes that most accessible. Great thing is now on Mac we have a Mac OS desktop app for Chat GPT, which is super cool, and hopefully we get that for Windows soon. But whatever brings you back to it.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, sometimes the place to start isn't even work stuff. It's like, pick apart this meal plan, or, help me do this or that, or I've got this weird pain in my knee,
Yep.
and I can't be bothered to go to the doctor when maybe you should. Sometimes even stuff like that is the better starting point.
Yeah, and just getting comfortable and familiar with it and realizing that it is an iterative conversation, right? And that maybe the first answer isn't gonna be great, but that the more you
Yeah.
talk with it, the better it's gonna get. And making sure that you're, like you said, providing it the context it needs to be able to provide the right answers, because that can often be one of the problems, is that if it's giving you crappy answers, it's because of the context. You haven't narrowed it down. And do you have like, what are your thoughts on frameworks, like things like the Risen framework? Do you have frameworks that you recommend, or do you think people should just go in and just start, not worry so much about having a framework that they use when they're dealing with prompts?
I don't push people to specific frameworks so much because each new model you get, the constraint changes in terms of what you need to tell it and
Hmm.
what it'll do well and what it doesn't do well. I do think we have Google hard coded in our mind where you chuck a single thing in there and you get a page of results, and untraining that to it becoming more of an open-ended conversation.
Yeah.
Um, that I think is a big shift. Um, just kind of learning what works and what doesn't work, trying to be plugged into some sort of uh, some sort of thought leadership on AI, because there is so much that's changing and it's hard to keep up. Like, it's not the sort
Yeah.
of thing where you have to be going deep and plugging in every single day, but just to have some sort of drip feed there to upskill you a bit along the way to learn best practices. Because what two people can get out of ChatGPT right now, I mean, there's just a vast like
Different.
delta from someone that can hustle that thing and know all the right ways to do it versus someone who can't. Um, and it may become less of a learned skill down the road as it gets better at reading our minds, but it's honestly all the same problems that we have working with other human beings. I mean, you go
Yeah.
delegate a task and they come back and do it in a wildly different way than you expected. And you're like, oh, yeah, well, it's actually because I didn't tell you XYZ. So it's oftentimes it's actually easier for somebody to get mad at a computer than a
Than
human,
it
where
is a person.
there's a little more friction with the human than just like closing the tab.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's easy to get frustrated with it when it's like, yeah, you didn't really give it the context to do it well.
Yeah. I've gotten salty with ChatGPT once or twice, where it wasn't giving me what I wanted, and I had to use some expletives. But um, and I think that one of the things I've often talked about with you and with other guests is that I think that one of the other problems that we're having with AI is that it's a solution hunting for a problem. And that's why a lot of people struggle with it, is because they're so amazed with what its capabilities are, but they haven't really figured out, well, what they haven't started with the problem first and then saying, okay, well, this is the way we can use AI as the solution. So I wonder, from your perspective, have you seen some problems within your community that AI has turned out to be a great solution for? And if so, can you share some of those?
Yeah, yeah, it's really looking for the solution. That's like, there's so many people working on that. It's like, how do you like this framing that I heard the other day? It is like the invention of the tractor. The tractor itself doesn't do all that much. Like, it's not particularly helpful. It is all the things you can build around the tractor that make your life better, and all the attachments and all those different things. And that's kind of how language models feel like right now. Like, cool, we got a tractor. What do I do with it next? Um,
Hmm.
I think honestly, the biggest stuff I'm seeing this year is actually probably AI vision models,
Yeah.
um, which can pull text off of things much, much better than OCR ever could before, even handwriting.
Yeah.
And when you pair an AI vision model being able to see and understand something with the ability of large language models to do a little bit of reasoning, it's now possible to just chuck this thing a pile of documents, and it can read these things near flawlessly and make these kind of connections itself that OCR couldn't have done before to get you to a more structured output. And so that's really powerful when it comes to like accounts payable processes. And in the US, a huge amount of our income tax processes are based on paper documentation
Yes.
from all these disparate sources. And so to have a centralized kind of mind that can ingest all of that and then output it in a structured format goes way farther than OCR ever took us. I'd say
Hmm.
I'm probably seeing the most interesting things with vision models. The biggest thing with like Chat GPT and why, and I've got hours and hours and hours of like Chat GPT use case for accounts and stuff like that on YouTube. And honestly, what makes that hard for people is the best use of that is actually pretty personal. It's what's like that thing I'm doing for one or two clients that wipes out an afternoon every month, and like what is the very me specific use case that I can plug it
Hmm.
into. Like those are the coolest things I've seen, is just the very nuanced sort of specific to you solutions.
What's the favorite one that you've seen, if you can share?
I love the report hustling stuff. So in ChatGPT, you can save GPTs, which are like
Yeah.
custom little assistants that you can create. And on the ChatGPT team plan, you can share those GPTs just internally with other members of your team.
Hmm.
So let's say in a month-end close, every single month, you got this client that uses system A. We got to export a report out of it and then have it in a different format to import into system B. Well, one person that's good at prompting can set up that GPT where all that assistant knows how to do is you give it a file, it changes it to a different format, and then spits out, say a CSV in the correct format where it goes and gets imported as a bunch of journal entries or something like that.
Hmm.
That's a GPT that a member of your team can make once. And then anytime a member of your team has to do that same process, you've got it right there. It's super easy. It's like all these e-commerce integration tools, which are super, super valuable and do all these different things. It's like a bite-sized version of that anybody can go out and create on their own, specific to their needs.
Yeah, and like you said, hyper personalized to their unique use case, which sometimes those tools don't solve the specific problem that you're having. Which is, I mean, that's the thing that's incredibly powerful. And you talked about vision too, and so as you know, we use Power Automate for RPA, and now Power Automate now has something they call AI Hub built into it, which has this vision tool, and you can literally build your own Expensify Dext receipt bank with as little as 5 documents, and it's using AI based image recognition. So the quality of it is phenomenal. And literally, all you do is you add up 5 documents, you choose the fields that you want to pull off of it, and in those 5 documents, you show it where it is, and then not only does it come back and start fetching that on any other documents that you give it going forward, it's actually telling you, well, I think I'm 99% accurate here. I think I'm only 80% accurate over here. I think I'm 75% accurate here. So it's telling you and giving you feedback onto how consistent it thinks it is. And it's able to learn. And it's not like traditional OCR where now that has to be in the exact same spot it
Mhm.
was every time. It's just said, okay, you've told me where it is. And now I'm seeing relative to the other information on the page, what types of things to look for. So you can load in other things that don't match that exact frame or format, and it still recognizes it. It's incredible. And like you said, is I think on the personal tax side, this is one of the areas where I think we're going to see big changes this year. Obviously, personal tax for both you and I, even though we're in different countries, is all very seasonal based, right?
Mhm.
And we've got some time before our next season is due, and I think we're going to see some big changes in what we see from both individual firms building out their own tools, but also applications and solutions coming in. Because think about the ability now with using computer vision to be able to have your clients who dump a shoebox on you. And now at least the AI can take that and be like, okay, these are donation receipts. These are medical receipts. These are, we call them T4s for income. We've got different slips, but to
Mhm.
be able to even just simply put those into different folders for you so that now you have this information categorized and sorted in a way. And not only that, like, remember that age old problem of, hey, give me 12 bank statements and they give you 12, but two of them are repeating, or they give you
Yeah.
11. And now you don't even have to look at it to figure out what's missing. You throw that into the AI and the AI is like, you're missing November. You know, you're and to be able to sort and do that preamble categorization beforehand, I think is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And for us, as you know, we're an RPA, we're diving headstrong into RPA, which, I know was hot for a minute, but it seemed to like it didn't get the lift off that I think it deserves in our community. But I think when you power RPA with Gen AI, the things that
Yeah.
you're capable of doing are incredible. And especially when you start with the problem first, which for a lot of us is gathering and collecting and sorting information, right?
Yep. Yeah. Uh, AI agents are really the realization of the promise of RPA.
Yeah,
And it's unfortunate that to date, in my opinion, Microsoft's really dropped the ball where they were kind of in the unbelievable position to really lead the way here, and they haven't. But the notion of having an AI assistant that can see your desktop, that can understand what's happening on your screen, you can be in conversation with it. Um, if RPA is kind of the fingers, the ability to work the keyboard and the mouse and all of that, combining that with an AI that can see and comprehend everything that's happening on your screen, but also be able to type into fields and click on things and like that is 100% the future of work and what makes the notion of AI agents so exciting.
yeah,
You combine with that their ability to learn and do repetitive things, and the next time you do the same type of project, it just kind of gets that. That's going to be so incredibly exciting. The frustrating thing right now, honestly, the the tools that are pulling all that disparate information together and doing really amazing things with it. We've got a number of them um, in the States now that are like, they'll have it before next tax season, but only by a couple few months, like they're working on it. And I've seen some demos that are just unbelievable. The really frustrating thing right now, frankly, is it's further fragmenting our workflows because we have these new companies that are really good, like AI first companies, almost in the way that we saw SaaS first companies that looked very, very different to desktop first companies. And you saw the desktop companies try to go SaaS, and that was really hard for them. There's a crop of companies that like just understand the new tool stack in a way that I don't know if we can call them legacy software companies can yet, but um, the result, at least in the States here, is it's like, okay, well, here's this cool new thing that absolutely crushes this part of the workflow. But not unlike ChatGPT, it requires me to pull all this context out here and then like pipe it back into the rest of the process because it's not doing it totally soup to nuts. Um, so that's kind of a frustrating intermediate step, but hopefully where this is headed, and you're talking about kind of more over the top AI agents and something that even lives on your desktop and can use those various different apps. Like hopefully where we're headed is something that unifies all that stuff, even being able to take something from A to B, and AI agents, you know, or assistants almost serving as the APIs of the future, Where in the
Yeah.
past we've had integrator apps that will take API A and make it talk to API B, actually having assistance on top of those and semantically being able to say, I need this thing to go over there, do it on the third of every
Yeah.
single month, so that we're all kind of building that software on the fly.
Yeah. And I guess, one of the things I see also and hear from the community is that a lot of people are hesitant to jump into the AI fold, even though they're interested and listening. They're not rolling it out because of that fear that it is changing so quickly, and that agents might replace RPA and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that? And I thought specifically, I mean, do you think agents would replace RPA?
I think they'll be one and the same. I mean, OpenAI is already working on this for their ChatGPT desktop assistant. Their plan is for it to not just talk about the work, but actually do the work and be able
Yeah,
to interact with the things on your screen. It's probably going to boil down to what's the easiest interface to create this stuff that's going to be accessible for people. But I suspect the future of RPA is it's semantic. It's telling it with a set of instructions. In fact, I think Power Automate even does this now. You describe the automation or whatever you want, and it kind of
yeah, you
builds
can
out
do
the
that.
structure for you.
Yeah, like you
So
can do in Zapier as well.
yeah, so I think it's just a very user-friendly version of that, or maybe something that even watches your screen and identifies when it sees those opportunities, which we've actually already had RPA tools that have done that for a while now. So I don't know that it replaces it as much as they become one and the same, probably.
They they work together because yeah, I mean that's the other thing too is like these agents look incredibly powerful, but what we've seen with AI, with its ability to make things up and have these delusions, that I cannot trust something that's going to change. What I value, as I said to you earlier, and what I love about RPA is the consistency. Yes,
Hmm.
I have to go through the process of dictating every step along the way, but once I've dictated that step and that process, I know I'm going to have consistency. There's not going to be any hallucinations. There's not going to be any changes in what step it chooses to take because it's thinking on its own, right? And so I think particularly in the accounting world where we have so many processes that are highly structured, where we want a consistent step by step, that we might want to use AI to help us build those out so that we don't have to figure out, okay, this is how I choose the selector and this is how I do that. But once we have set that process, that process becomes locked in place, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's I don't know, there's kind of the whole fear narrative and firms that are maybe hesitant to jump in. And it is changing fast and it is hard to keep up with. But I mean, it's like early iPhone days when it was like, oh, when's the right time to buy an iPhone? As soon as I buy one, they're gonna announce a new one with a bunch of cool new features. Uh it's like, yeah, that is a problem, but that's not a reason to not start.
Hmm.
Um there's a lot of organizational issues wrapped up in that from if your change management blocked right now, you're just going to be even more change management blocked when the tools get even better. So like there's a lot of things kind of bundled up to unpack in that, but
Hmm.
it's very much a skill set to develop. Um, and if you look at all the different tech that we use across our firms, anytime you buy into a product, you are hitching your wagon to where they're going. And I mean, never in my life has there been a technology that is developing as quickly as AI is right now. So it's like if we're just making bets, if we think about it that way, it is the right horse to bet on right now.
Yeah.
From ChatGPT 18 months ago having memory equivalent to like 2 pages, and now we have models from Google that can hold like 3,000 pages actively in memory. And like, it's just every aspect of this from the cost to the speed to its capabilities, like it's just growing so fast.
It is an incredible pace of change, which I find exciting. Some people find intimidating, but I mean, my ADD mind loves change and
Dude, me too.
new
Yeah.
technology, right? Um, Have you seen any other hurdles that have held people back from AI other than, fear of change or the pace of change?
Definitely just general scaries around the newness of it, just like cloud.
Mhm.
Kind of the ambiguous spookiness of this new thing, and a lot of stories you hear about the bad and the wrong ways to use AI, but sometimes that can
Yeah,
get conflated into AI bad,
yeah,
when the fact that there are bad ways to use AI does not mean that there are not completely okay ways to be and secure ways to be using AI right now. Um, Definitely folks still struggling with the ethics of training data. And this isn't just a chat GBT thing, it's everything. And it's image
yeah.
generation and so many different examples of this.
Google's the
And
worst.
yeah, it's tough. It's one of the I can say it definitely feels like one of those what are you gonna do, genie's out of the bottle type of situations. Like it's really hard
Mhm,
to put your finger on anything in the past where they successfully put the genie back in the bottle, like what social media did to publishing. And like there's just so many examples of this where it's like it absolutely does suck, but it is like a freight train that feels like it's not going to stop. And so there are completely justified moral grounds to not want to be exploring stuff right now. And stuff like Getty Images announced, a few days ago, a model trained on all licensed uh, images, and like they're doing like rev shares with all of the artists behind all of the and the photographers behind the images they use. And so there are people trying to do fair use versions of this. But if you look at a monster like, you know, GPT-4 that's supposedly trained on like 1.5 trillion parameters, a massive percentage of the entire internet, the practical aspects of how do we compensate people for what just got gobbled up by that model, like that is a hard problem to solve for.
absolutely. And um, that's the thing, is that we are getting a whole bunch of hard problems to solve for. And, as far as regulations and guidelines, I know the EU has sort of led the way on trying to solve for that. The US is trying to step in and put in some regulations, but it gets really difficult, particularly when you have regulators who are, bureaucracies who don't move fast at the best of times, and technologies that's changing before laws could even be put into place or regulations could even be put in place, which makes it really difficult. And I'd just be curious what your thoughts are on, so, fair use and those types of reimbursement are one things, but what about some of the other ethical issues that we're seeing around, being able, like, perfect example, what Elon Musk did with the Kamala Harris video, and, faking her voice, and that becoming so much easier for the average person to be able to implement. What are your thoughts on those types of AI issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the US, we're coming into a huge election cycle, obviously, and it's going to be wildly problematic. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to in the past is the internet giving everybody a voice and letting anyone put their thoughts out there. When before that, we were reading the work of journalists and
Mhm.
folks that had a degree of, um, there was a lot more fact checking that went into what was published. And then when anybody could publish something, or especially early days Wikipedia, where you're like, "Ah, I can't believe anything that's on there." Um, as much as it seems like the right thing to regulate the ability to generate things of other people's likeness, honestly, I mean, that genie is already out of the bottle. 6 months ago, I created basically a visual clone of myself talking on my podcast, and it took about 15 minutes, and like my wife couldn't tell the difference. So like
Yeah,
that stuff's the train's already left the station there, and even if they do regulate it, which they probably will, there will still be open source tools that can do that stuff in a way that's completely indistinguishable from reality. So I think there will be a regulatory side to it. I think the bigger change will probably be our understanding of what we're seeing and what we're consuming,
mhm,
and the safeguards that we have to put in place to, when I call you and tell you that I need a wire transfer and, just everything around that, I think we'll just have to have a totally different framework for how we protect ourselves from that.
And I think that the classic safe word is still the best solution for that. I don't know if you've implemented that within your family yet or not, but it's one of the big things I advocate for. As soon as I heard about stuff, because I've actually had a lot of phishing. I don't know if I've ever shared the story with you. I'll tell you another time. But we were hacked a couple years back,
Mm,
and ever since then, we've been targets of phishing because we're obviously on some lists now, some you know
mm,
uh, dark web list, and we get phishing attacks all the time. And so my staff and my family, we all have an internal safe word, which is, so whether you're being spoofed by email or you're being spoofed by a AI generated video or a voice clone or any of that. Now I think that in this day and age, unfortunately, that's every family needs to have their safe word.
yeah, that 100% they do. We talked about that last holiday season, because it's a huge deal, especially as we're all just out there. Like anybody can create a clone of yourself or I and spoof a phone
Or
call. I think my favorite I've seen was a few months ago. It was a finance person got pulled into a meeting with a bunch of execs in a Zoom call.
yeah,
There were like
yeah, I saw
4
that
or
one.
5 other people there, none of whom were real people. They didn't realize it. It was all like avatars of their bosses,
Hmm.
and they sent like a $6 million wire or something like that as a result. But yeah, the we have to keep innovating in how we protect ourselves from that stuff as it develops.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about, moving on to maybe some of the specifics of, you know, what you use AI for? Because I find it interesting. Like, are you using any AI at all in any video generation? Like, obviously, you're not using something like InVideo or anything to generate your videos, but do you use any sort of AI in video editing aspects, or is there um, specifically in some of the video content that you produce? How are you using AI in that aspect, or are you?
We use it tons. So there are just workflow examples of AI. So you take an interview like this. There's tools now that will cut down an interview like this and remove all the pauses and do
Yeah.
camera cuts to full you, full me back and forth and do that in 20 seconds. What would have taken a junior editor probably an hour to do before, maybe more. Stuff like that that's just super practical. Um, we use AI to enhance the silly and the ridiculous oftentimes. So in the past, we've had various recurring characters. Steve's the biggest one, who like are kind of these client avatars that we return to and tease and kind of do some world building around. And those are all characters that are real people that got pulled into a warehouse one day and somebody bought them lunch to shoot some stock video featuring them. Uh, and I hope those people never stumble into my content. But we've now moved to those recurring characters purely being creations of our own, where they begin life as image generations with Midjourney, and then we use other tools to put them into specific poses to animate them into doing different things. And these are now not real people, but things that we have created from scratch that we have full ownership of. That I can print on a T-shirt, that I can print on a silly oil painting version of that person and hang it on the wall behind me. I mean, stuff as simple as that uh, is part of every single thing that we create now. Um, we don't do anything along the lines of creating something that looks or sounds like me, just because we certainly could, and we have all the tools to do that. That's just a line that I'm not comfortable crossing because I think
Hmm.
it cheapens what we do, which
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a team of 4 people. Like, there's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into all the creative stuff that we do. I don't think it would heighten, the quality of what we're doing if we did do that. One really cool thing we've done is we're up to like 290 30-minute episodes of my podcast, and we've got an AI assistant that's trained on all of that data where I can ask it a question, it will instantly answer, citing huge chunks of podcasts going back the last 2 years. It's remarkably accurate. A few weeks back, we did a debate where basically I would answer a question, and then my AI assistant that just uses my training data would answer the question, and the answers were blindly judged. And we went through 6 questions, and it came out a dead heat. It was literally a tie. So we'll use it for situations where it's going to be fun or interesting, stuff like that. Occasionally, if someone asks me, hey, have you ever talked about this or that in your content? And I'm like, I mean, there's hundreds of hours, and I'm like, probably a bunch
Maybe.
of places. Chuck the question in here, and it'll give you a few citations to 42 minutes into this podcast or something like that. And it can be a helpful tool like that.
Cool. Um, just out of curiosity, I'd love to know, like, are there any specific, like, maybe you can share some of the names of the apps that you're using. And before you do that, quick question about that video tool. Did you convert it all to text, and is that what you did, and then use that as a library in like a GPT? How did you do that?
The chat assistant?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a tool called Delphi, DELPHI.ai. That one's
Okay.
super convenient in that one of the ways you can connect it to data is just connecting it to an RSS feed of a podcast. So every time we publish a new episode, it gets updated with that information, and we don't have to do any extra work. And so, yes, it's pulling from the text transcript of that. And so what it's retrieving is the text of what I said.
Right. Yeah, because otherwise the size of the files would be massive, and you wouldn't be able to have the necessary context, as we talk about all too often.
Yeah. Yeah.
What other AI tools are you personally using? Obviously, ChatGPT. Oh, well, and is ChatGPT your go-to generative AI, or do you prefer any of the others?
ChatGPT is the best if you're working with different file types. Right now, Claude, they've got a newer model, Sonnet 1.5. So the website is claude.ai. That is the frontier model right now. It beats almost everything else. And for any sort of writing or outlining, it's really, really good. Have you played with Claude Artifacts at all yet?
A very small amount.
So they recently launched something called Artifacts, which is like a little environment to run what it creates. And so if I tell it to
Yeah.
create code to you'd be this little one-page site that does like this complex commission calculation for a client or something like that, it'll write all the code, but it'll actually then run the application there also. So I can immediately run it and say, move this button over here, change this or that. And it's such a fun thing to play around with because it is like semantically building software live and telling it to iterate on. It's like having a little engineer sitting next to you to make this little helpful thing.
Hmm. Yeah, truthfully, I haven't been doing it to build a lot of code really, which I've just been too focused on other things, I guess. So I haven't played around with that too much, but I was sort of impressed with that capability. And it's just, again, amazing at which the pace of the innovations are coming. Um, and and I like that we have competitors in the market, right? I mean, it does seem that OpenAI has a pretty healthy lead, but they're not completely beyond the realm of anyone else being able to catch them and compete with them. And it's interesting to see the way different organizations are approaching it, both in the training of the data, the interfaces that are being used, and the models that are coming out as a result of the different approaches the different companies are taking. Um, I guess one other question I had for you is this sort of, I guess, goes back to some of the fears we talked about of AI. Do you believe in the singularity? Do you have any fears around that? Do you think that that is an inevitability, a possibility, or just a bunch of hype?
Yeah, there's a lot of things wrapped up in like the framing of the singularity, but I mean, I think of human intelligence as, if you charted it on a graph, you have a level that is human intelligence. And we are super afraid of anything that gets close to that, right? So we got like dolphins
Mhm.
down here, and we like dogs because they're a little bit further down there. Um, and it's for sure getting closer. to be honest, I mean, it seems absolutely inevitable that at some point we create something that is capable of surpassing that, not just surpassing that, but then continuing to grow. In all likelihood, I think that's where we're headed. And in our lifetime, we will probably have something that is capable of much more than what we are just ourselves with our, um, with what we know, what we're capable of. It's very contextual. I mean, because we've for a long time we've had computers that are way better at humans and at doing very specific things. And people like to say, ChatGPT can't do basic math. It's never going to replace me. And it's like, buddy, computers have been doing calculations better than you for decades. It's just a matter of combining those two technologies, and you've got something pretty compelling. So yeah, I honestly, I do think it is inevitable. I'm a little surprised that this hasn't been politicized more than it has yet, because if we are truly on this inevitable path to something that can cure disease and this sort of civilization altering thing, then this ought to be the next space race. I mean, like everybody's there's this notion that whoever can get there first has this massive advantage, right? There's talk recently of this mega server farm that Microsoft and OpenAI are said to be building together, like $80 billion. And they think that will be the server farm that can get us to, quote, general intelligence. And just out of curiosity, I went back and looked at, like, what did the Soviet Union spend on the space race in today's dollars? Almost exactly $80 billion. So like it'll be fascinating to see where we're headed. I'm a little surprised that the governments haven't gotten more involved, and I have to imagine the better it gets, the more involved they will get, because everybody's going to want to get there first. But it's going to be wild. Like the next decade, like it's going to be very interesting.
Or maybe the governments are involved in ways that we don't see and understand, right? To go back to that conspiracy theory, because I cannot imagine for the life of me that there is not some cyber war going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of in a
Yeah.
race for artificial intelligence between Russia, China. Like we know that there's a cyber war going on between Russia and the US. Like it's not talked about, but it's known, right? And so I've got to think artificial intelligence is part of that cyber war that we're maybe not aware of.
Yeah, Sam Altman's actually said, OpenAI CEO, some really interesting things about state actors. And you think about, I mean, because GPT-4, their best models, these are closed models. Like they've got the secret sauce and nobody else does.
Hmm.
You think about the power and the security implications of something like that getting loose. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Now, I guess to drop the conspiracy theories and maybe put on or open up our crystal ball, do you have any predictions that you'd like to put out there that where you think we might be maybe 1, 3, and 5 years from now?
Ugh. Um, in the next 12 months, the biggest thing is what AI vision models are enabling for sure, because I've seen it with my own eyes. Some of it's out there now. A lot of it will be out in the next 6 months. What we were talking about, the ability to take a pile of unstructured information and put it into a structured format. What it's going to do is it's going to force us to get more structured about a lot of things that historically we've not done in a very structured way, because how you organize all that information may be very different than how the next firm organizes it. And so there's going to be some
Mhm.
pressure on us to be better about standardizing that stuff. That's like next 12 months. That stuff is super, super compelling. Next 24 to 36 months, I think agents really become a bigger thing. I'm particularly excited for desktop agents. And the ChatGPT desktop app is like the first little infant kind of baby version of that, where it can see my screen if I want it to, and I can talk about what's on my screen. But big unlocks there are, well, what about when I can just have a passive conversation with it as I work? Like it's a co-working thing. Like I'm typing and
Mhm.
I'm working and I'm like, go look up this thing about this app that I can't figure out. And it goes and does that in the background and figures it out. Like that seems incredibly helpful to have that sort of passive assistant with you, totally
Mhm.
removing the friction of going out to another app. And
Yeah.
then the next really big step there is when that assistant is able to use my computer. Um, And we have all of the tech to do this right now, but nobody's shipped something, probably because it needs to be in a state of reliability where we'll actually trust it to do that, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about the progression of where we're going, I don't know if you saw the last GPT-4o announcement where they showed off that new voice model, and it was super compelling, the talking back and forth. I think
Yeah.
step one is having that on your desktop and just having this running conversation with an assistant. And we may have that for 6 to 12 months before that assistant can ever do anything on our machine. But imagine working with that assistant for 6 months, and then one day it grows hands and it can do stuff on your computer. You're already comfortable with it. You know what it can and what it can't do, and what you trust it with and what you probably shouldn't trust it with.
Hmm.
That's going to be super exciting. I think in the next 24 months, we probably have some version of that. Ultimately, how that impacts work, because that thing can then start to learn workflows and do, any sort of repetitive thing. That changes knowledge work a lot. And predicting
Hmm.
anything beyond that, I think gets really tricky.
And I think I think you've got a great vision. The only thing I would add in that is the convergence of robotics with AI in more meaningful ways. Like to not only have that assistant on your computer, but as a robot in your house that go wash my dishes,
Yeah.
go make my bed, hey, go pick up my dry cleaning, that combination. It's gonna change the world, I think, substantially. And I mean, the I think the movie that I think has predicted the future of what we're going to have, unfortunately, is Wally, where we're going to be those slobs laying down in our beds that run around as in virtual reality as these robots do everything for us.
If we can aspire to a version of the future that's been presented in TV and movie, in my opinion, Star Trek: The Next Generation,
Would be the
that is the ultimate.
most optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has time to enjoy themselves, focus on the arts, do what they want to do. It doesn't seem very realistic, but I hope that's where we get to.
And you've got to love Star Trek, who has consistently projected future-based technologies
Oh,
with a lot of what Gene Roddenberry's mind had come up with stuff that is, so scientifically based and turned out to give us things in the real world that do look very much like Star Trek and Starfleet. So I like your optimistic view. It's better than Wally, I would say,
yeah.
and people are certainly in a lot better shape, anyways.
It is amazing how sci-fi seems to will things into existence.
Hmm.
Star Trek, the notion of having a video call with somebody,
Yeah,
unthinkable.
yeah,
Basically walking around with iPads, that's
yeah,
nuts. The movie Her, which is the whole like having this interaction with an assistant before ultimately falling in love with it.
yeah.
And he has this thing in his ear. That movie came out 12 months before the AirPods were announced. So like all of these things are like so ahead of their time. And now it's like, oh yeah, no, that kind of is happening. Ready Player One and VR stuff. Like there's so many examples of this. Um, it's kind of fun if you're a sci-fi nerd, like I imagine we are, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things about sci-fi is that it is all us nerds who love the sci-fi. And it's those nerds who often end up building a lot of this technology. And what it does is focus our attention to a point. And again, allows us to come up with that process, which we talked about earlier, is starting with the problem rather than the solution, right? So we go, oh, hey, we want to be able to have, face video calls. We want to be able to have jets in cars, and the more we're wowed and impressed by that, the more we focus our minds on solving that problem, and it just shows the power of what humanity is capable of when we focus our attention, right?
That's totally what it is. It is rallying people behind a specific vision, and TV and movie does that really, really well, but also in terrifying ways too, like when you talk about
Yes.
Terminator and stuff like that.
Yeah. But we are, believe it or not, at time, as quickly as these episodes fly by, they always make me wanting to chat with my guests longer. But I do want to be respectful of your time. And Jason, I really appreciate you coming out today. Any final words or suggest, or do you want to throw out your handles for how people can connect with you on YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn?
If the people are on social and they haven't been bothered, inconvenienced by me yet, then I don't know how they would have missed me. But if you're not, I'm on pretty much all social media. Just search my name, you'll find me there.
Yeah.
Parting wisdom, man, just like go out and experiment. Like, be curious. Make some connect with some friends that are curious. Also, like make a group text, a Slack channel, something like that. Who are some people you know that are experimenting and just kind of share the journey in a fun way?
Curiosity, my favorite word.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. Everyone else, we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Bye for now.